What happens when a decorated British Army officer, an advisor to over 400 CEOs, admits that the toughest leadership move isn't strategy, it's taking off the mask? Jonathan Bowman-Perks MBE joins me to talk about why vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the whole damn point. If you've been performing success instead of living it, this one's for you. Your nervous system sets the tone. Your energy speaks before you do. How you show up is the culture. I'm Dr. Tamsin Astor, and this is Hot Habits, Conscious Leadership in Action. Hello. My guest today has been shot at, advised the head of the British Army, survived the corporal jungle at PwC and IBM, and has somehow still had time to write best-selling books and host a top-ranked global podcast, Inspiring Leadership. I've been a guest. Jonathan Bowman-Perks MBE has spent nearly 4 decades helping leaders find their true north, whether that's in a war zone, a boardroom, or the messy, beautiful middle ground of being human in charge of other humans. He's coached over 400 CEOs, been honored by the Queen, and he's here to get real about the habits, the hard lessons, and what it actually takes to lead with clarity when everything around you is on fire. Jonathan, welcome to Hot Habits.
Well, this is lovely. I've been really looking forward to it. And thank you for such a warm and generous introduction. I'm thinking, who is this person? I'd love to meet him.
I know. It's one of the best things about having somebody do an intro for you. You're like, wow, I sound amazing. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today on Hot Habits. So, at the start of every Hot Habits conversation, I ask my guests to bring an object with them, something that is like a tangible representation of a hot habit in their life. So I think of it as a way of bringing leadership out of theory and into everyday reality. So tell me, what object did you bring with you today and why did you choose it?
I brought my boot. This is the Cyprus Walkabout boot. It was an award I got, goodness me, 1985, winners. So we won the Double Mountain Marathon in Cyprus, 2 marathons up a 6,500-foot mountain with kit, 3-man team, navigating through checkpoints. You don't know what they are until you run to the map and you copy it down. And I think the habit that came from that was the one of resilience and discipline. And when you felt like giving up, which I definitely did at the end of the first day, as we were near the summit, and I wanted to walk, and my team colleagues wanted to walk. And I thought, yeah, we'll walk. And then I had this little image of my father sitting on a cloud, and he goes, commit or collude, your choice, Jonathan. Are you gonna win this, or are you just gonna take the easy option and just do what pleases the others by walking? I went, no, sod it, I'm going to run. And I grabbed them by the shirts and I said, we are effing running. And they went, okay, we'll run. Just take your hands off our shirts, we'll run. And we won the first day and we set the world record for the second day.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I love that you use the word resilience, because one of the things that, is a common theme in your writing and your podcasting and what you share out in the world is that you talk about how leaders build resilience by embracing vulnerability. And of course, when I read that and sort of started thinking about that and sort of noticed that theme is, like, to me, that seems like in polar opposition to the military. I've never been in the military, but, coming from a military background, was that a hard pill to swallow? Because it seems to be like it's an opposition. Or did the army actually teach you that in a way that, us civilians, wouldn't expect?
I think that's a really great question, as always, Tamsin, with your questions. And when I went to boarding school as a young man, and I remember my mother, because by that stage my father had been killed. His sword is on the back wall for those watching. He was killed age 33, flying and saving the lives of 2 other pilots, but that's a story in itself for another time. Mother took me to the boarding school, and I must have been, 8 or something like that. And she handed me over to the housemaster, and I remember standing on the pavement watching her drive away. And I go, she's leaving me with this complete strange man. And like, what have I done wrong? what's going on? And I really found that particularly hard. So then as I started to cry, the headmaster looked down at me and he went, "What are you doing? Don't snivel. Young men do not cry." Oh, right. Okay. So on went the first mask. And then, of course, you go and join the British Army and you go to the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, which is one of the finest leadership institutions in the world. I still believe that. And they train you to be resilient and to see death and destruction, to take life if required, to save, to kill the Queen's enemy. And you learn that you don't show your emotions. It's not a good idea. It's not safe to do so. And the soldiers look to you and there's things blowing up around you, people being shot, mayhem, chaos. And they go, "The boss is great. He's like so unflappable, so calm. Nothing seems to bother him, even when hell's breaking loose." And that's the next mask that goes on, that that's the way you should be. And in this regiment, this is the way you behave. And so those masks were put on over the years, and I played that part and learned how to lead in incredibly difficult situations. And it's only later on in my 50s and 60s, I'm now 64 this weekend, that I've begun to take off the masks and be comfortable being uncomfortable, to be strong enough to be vulnerable, that only the strong can be vulnerable and can admit those 10 words, 3 phrases that our friend Jeff Nishwich told us: "I was wrong, I don't know, and I need some help. I was wrong, I don't know, and I need some help." And I can now use those words. And you wake me up in the middle of the night, Tamsin, and ask me a question. I'm not going to make a story up. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm just going to tell you how it is. Because I've got a finite amount of time left to live, maybe 8 years, who knows? And in that time, I'm not going to waste it. And I'm not going to have conversations. And I'm not going to spend an hour that I'll never get back. This is an hour that is well spent. So I will value this. But other things I'll say no to.
I love this idea of masks and like the experiences we have creating masks that we put on, whether it's, you know, like the boarding school mask, the men don't cry mask, the men don't ask for help mask, the hyper independent successful woman, whatever mask, you know, all these masks we put on. And how, you know, this sort of reframe, which I think people like Brene Brown have been so helpful in us rethinking, is that vulnerability is a strength rather than a weakness. When you are working with leaders and CEOs and people who are wearing multiple masks, the first thing that sort of occurs to me is there, there's the concept of the keystone habit, that if you can figure out your keystone habit, which perhaps is sleep, and if you sleep, you eat well, you exercise well, you meditate. Some people it's exercise, some people it's healthy food, right? When you think about leaders wearing these masks, is there a mask that if you can unhook first or get them to drop first, helps with dropping the other masks more easily, like that kind of keystone mask idea?
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I'll use another prop. So for those listening, it's the latest of my 3 books, but it's called The CEO's Compass: How to Navigate Your Team Through Turbulent Times, which is where we got to meet, and the 400 guests like you are in here. And the reason I share this is that there are 8 components of how my wife and I designed this, Lee, and whether it be moral quotient or purpose quotient or legacy, those are the keystones, those 3. A bit like in a Norman church, where those stones, as the pressure comes on, they get closer and tighter and stronger. So I think if you've got your moral quotient and your values, without values, like we're seeing with Donald Trump and people like that, the compass is all over the place and anything goes. But when you're clear on your values, then you're sure. But when a CEO loses their true north, and they go on magnetic north, which at the moment is moving from Siberia across into Canada. It's moving a lot at the moment, magnetic north. They're lost. And it's the gray area. And then if they haven't got a legacy that they're leaving, they don't own the business, they're leaving it better for the person they handed on to, stewardship. And purpose and meaning, that their life has a spiritual content, a sense of the 2 moments in your life as Mark Twain said, the moment you were born and the moment you found out why, that's really what gives you. And I found out the why. And so living my life on purpose rather than off purpose allows me to ask the CEOs, are you living your life on purpose? What is your life purpose? Why are you here? What are you in service of? And so I find those three are key. The others are important, but those three, a bit like you use the word keystone habits, I do believe sleep and exercise and good, healthy nutrition are fundamental to my performance. So I've recently, and then I'll pass it back over to you, Tamsin, I've recently been diagnosed, I sort of knew it for some years, but with obstructive sleep apnea. And because I have also been found out to have this heart defect that I was born with, I never knew about, only found out a couple of years ago, which limits the length of my life. If I address the obstructive sleep apnea, that will stop the heart failing as early as it might do. I might live a year or so longer. So now wearing this sort of Silence of the Lambs mask, which causes my wife to laugh or run screaming from the bedroom, it gives me an extra hour of sleep. Now that's 30% more performance. So you're looking at keystone habits, sleep. This has proved itself in the last 2 months to me. What a difference. And as a result, I train 4 times a week with my personal trainer, not with him all the time, but he comes with me occasionally. But I am now pushing weights at 64. I could never push at 20 because I've got the extra sleep, which has had the knock-on effect, and I'm eating healthily.
I actually call them the healthy sex habits, sleep, eat, exercise, because I'm all about acronyms and making things easier because, those are such core habits. Yeah. And they have such a sort of knock-on effect.
I like that.
Interesting.
I will remember that. The healthy sex habits. Yeah.
Right. So I'm interested in this idea of the true north, because I think, people talk about this sort of concept in different ways in leadership and in personal development and in, all the different spheres that we move through. I think the first thing that is occurring to me as I'm sort of noodling on this concept is, in your experience, like what's the single biggest habit or mindset or block, right, that stops leaders from really knowing what their true north is? Like what gets in the way of that?
And I've got a personal story of when I got it wrong myself. So let's go to what I see from all the 64 years of learning good and bad habits and people who had a true north and those who didn't. A true north is your founding principles and values. What you will do, as Oscar Wilde said, but he had his problems, a gentleman or a lady is someone who knows what they will do and what they won't do. And what will you do and what will you not do? And I love Marcus Aurelius, who said, don't look for the third thing. Do the right thing, 1. 2, because it's the right thing. And 3, don't look for the third thing, which is, well done, Tamsin, you've done a great job. You did the right thing. You don't look for that. Just do the right thing because it's the right thing. And I think in the past, I've wanted to look for the third thing. I've always wanted to say, oh, you did the right thing. Well done. And not only that, but because particularly it's a male issue, you may think maybe it's wider than that with some women, but I think generally it's a male issue biologically. We're massively competitive. I know lots of competitive women, but men, it's always in a ranking and you have to do well. And I was in the British Army where you had to come first on this course or you were constantly ranked and you got an outstanding report. And I'd always had outstanding reports. So I got sent to the Royal Military Academy Centre to be a Top Gun instructor at the best of the best. My regiment said, this is our best officer. He's going to be there with the best of all the others. And I thought, oh, I've arrived. Aren't I wonderful? I'm God's gift. And then they gave me my first year's report and they went, this officer is average. I went, what? What do you mean I'm average? I've always been outstanding, not just average, not even good. I've been outstanding. No, you are average. Compared to all these other superstars, you're average. And I was average, which is why I then reached out to people who'd known my father, Lieutenant Commander Paul Perks, when he was killed, and to learn from them, because I clearly was not an inspiring leader. And I wanted to learn from those who knew my father, who said he was a hero and he was an inspiring leader. He was very humble. He was very modest. I've got work on that to be done. But so that is why I had them all to lunch at Sandhurst and learnt from them. And there's a story that goes with that. So I think with moral quotient, this idea of being competitive and trying to always do your best, fine, but it can be so intense that people will forget true north. And I did. So I was on a particular course, and it had become practice between people unofficially that you'd ask someone who'd been on the course before you, can you share with me some of your essays and some of your notes? So know roughly what's going on. And I can do well learning from you, because he said, oh yeah, someone taught me and I got his notes. So there's this unofficial kind of unapproved arrangement that you could learn from other people. And then when you were given this surprise essay, you had a rough idea of the kind of format and layout. And then you'd also get together, a few of you, and you'd talk about what was coming up and what you'd heard about what goes on. So you're a bit better prepared. So I'm always one who wanted to be better prepared and do as well as I could in competition with others, because I finally came out of staff college in the top 10%. Great. I thought I'd really arrived. But then others got promoted beyond me. But let's go back to this moment on the course. And it came to the time to do this complicated essay on the future of some tank system. And I wasn't at all interested. And it was very complex and very detailed about the tank size and the engine size and the armor and the explosive reactive armor. Oh, goodness me. So I talked to this guy who went on to become a general and one of the top guys in the army. And he said, look, this is what I'm writing here. Look at this. And a few of us gathered round and we looked at his notes. And we went away with his ideas and we wrote them as if it was our own work. And it wasn't. It was his work. And so we were then called in when the essays were marked, and they said, did you cheat? No, sir, no. And of course, they knew that we had, even though we denied it, like some little 4-year-old. I said to my grandson, Riley, this robot vacuum cleaner has just set off. Did you press the button? Because it doesn't do it on its own. No, I won't be angry with you. Just tell me the truth. No, I didn't. And we were just like a 4-year-old. No, we didn't do anything wrong. Honestly, it was just our own ideas. And I got tasked with writing an essay on integrity and truth. And I have never forgotten that moment. Thank you for the colonel who decided he could have fired me. My career could have been over, could have left the armed forces, because I had acted without integrity, without a moral true north. My desire to succeed meant that I became like a Ferrari-seeking banker who'll send triple C rated stock and mortgage-backed securities and say it's triple A, and it wasn't. It was as bad.
So the habit that blocks leaders, and something that you're saying is something that you see sort of frequently in men, is this sort of competitive success, sort of the desire to succeed, the desire to be the best. And so it's in many ways you consider it a negative habit, which, I mean, one of the things that I find fascinating about working with people around habits is that the definition of a habit is something that is difficult to change, right? So inherent in the definition is that it's an automation that has been created that is not necessarily serving your true north, your big juicy vision, your why, your whatever it is that you're building towards, right? And so that's a habit that you've had to kind of acknowledge and make a shift. I think, one of the things that the sort of themes that I'm sort of seeing and hearing as you're talking is this idea of the training, right, that's required either to break a habit that is not serving you, or to, train so that you can show up, to fight the queen, now king's, enemies. And then the training required to sort of dismantle some of that, right? The removing of the masks. One of the things that, I hear a lot and I was at a talk yesterday about founders and how to make successful founder chemistry for sort of co-founders, right? How you bring people together in a successful way to launch a business. And one of the metaphors that kept coming up was the athlete, right? Which I know you talk about, is this idea of the corporate athlete, right? And so this sort of then leads me to this next question, which is, when you think about a training regimen, right? So for example, if you're training for a marathon, some days it's going to be rest, some days it's going to be sprint, some days it's going to be tempo run, some days it's going to be weightlifting, right? Stretching, etc. When you think about leaders, do you kind of conceptualize or use a training regimen that supports your leaders?
Yeah, everything you said fascinating. There's so many themes I could pick up on. training particularly, because of course, training for the Double Mountain Marathon, we trained for 3 months every day. And we had a very tough regimen that I set for, there was 30 of us training, and up and down this mountain, Mount Troodos in Cyprus. And it was grueling and it was tough. And there were rest days and things like that, because you need your rest days. You cannot continually train. And people make this mistake. They think they're just going to keep going harder and harder and harder with no downtime. And that was when one of my guests, Anna Hemmings, an Olympian, she had chronic fatigue syndrome for a year because she just didn't rest and recover. But I think the word that I'd use next to habit that precedes it is belief. So everything begins in the mind. If the mind can conceive it, the body can achieve it. I mean this up to a realism level, that if I believed that I could set a world record on that Double Mountain Marathon, I could do it. But if I thought, no, it's not possible. Like there's that famous story about the
5-minute mile. Yeah,
well,
exactly what I was going to say.
As soon as one person broke it, then another, and then the whole host of people broke it. So I do believe in the work of Nancy Klein. We both enjoyed her work, and the promise that changed everything, I won't interrupt you, means a lot to me. But Nancy has been a great mentor to me. And Nancy's concept that really you have untrue limiting assumptions that you live as if they are true, but they're untrue. And I see it as a bit like, if you remember the Roadrunner with boulders and things like this. I have this image of the Roadrunner, and there's this huge boulder blocking the canyon, and you're running towards it, you go, oh, can't go through, there's a boulder here. But actually, you go up with a big pin and you touch it, and it's actually inflatable boulder. It goes, psh. So it's an untrue limiting assumption. You live as if true, but actually the obstacle is the way, Marcus Aurelius, and that the classic, and you've got some lovely children. My daughter Harriet, who's now got her own daughter Sophia Pia. When Harriet was about, I don't know, she was about 9. She was doing some maths, and she went, "Daddy, I can't do this." So I thought, I'm going to practice this untrue limiting assumption, lives as if true. And I went, "Okay, Hattie, and if you could do it, how would you do it?" And she went, "Oh, I do it this way." Now, what happened there? She had an untrue limiting assumption, a belief that she couldn't do it. And I said, "Okay, and if you could do it, how would you do it?" And she instantly, the little mouse in the running around the maze, went, "It's this way." And she found a route. So that works for adults as much as for children. And I have learned time and again, and particularly with the kind of leaders that you and I work with, to really get to the heart of what is their belief system and where did this come from? Not that I want to psychoanalyze them, and you're much more experienced looking back at where it's come from, but actually, what if that wasn't true? What would you do if you could? Whatever. How would you go about it? And they start to do it, which then changes their habit. Change your habit, you change your lifestyle, and you change your destiny, to use that famous quote.
Yes, and I think, what's interesting as well about that is I think we have this idea sometimes that it needs to be very complicated, right? Or that it requires multiple steps. And I think, I went to a talk a few years ago, and I loved it was at $1 Million Round Table in Athens, and it was, I was one of the speakers, and the person who came on a couple of places after me talked about how we often have this idea that when we want to expand our comfort zone, it needs to be this really, sort of huge, glass breaking, door breaking, kind of massive shift. For it to actually be meaningful and to create some kind of sustainable long-term change and impact. And he made the argument, which I think is absolutely right, that it can just be a tiny little shift, and that it doesn't need to be this massive, almost violent, right? So this idea of like with training, right? If you add a pound to your weight and you do that every week, that's 50 pounds in a year, right? We have this idea sometimes that it has to be this really sort of huge shift. And I think when we sort of slow down and go, actually, the training regimen can be, mental, physical, emotional, all of the different places that we play in, right? And that we have to push up against. But it doesn't have to be huge, right? It's, one of the things that I sometimes work with my clients on. So for example, if I've got a client who wants to start working out before they go to work, and I'll say to them, just like put your sneakers, your running shoes, or, like your running kit, like in a pile next to the shower. So when you walk into the bathroom in the morning to brush your teeth, you're like, And maybe the first day you'll put the clothes on. Maybe the second day you'll leave the house, So, it's just like taking that little step. It doesn't have to be this massive thing, right?
Well, you make me smile because that's exactly what this morning happened. Last night, before I went to bed, I took out my running clothes and I put them in the bathroom by the loo. So when I get up about half an hour before my wife, she just likes that extra little bit of a lie-in with the dogs, just waiting for me to take them out for a run. But I'll go into the bathroom and I'll do my usual morning routine, but I will end up putting on my running kit. And what is interesting is the dogs are in the next room, just lying there. But as soon as I put on my running underpants, they hear it. And they other things can be going on, but they hear the underpants go on and they know I'm about to go for the run. And so they react to it. But I think what you're touching on, these tiny shifts, one leader said to me once that she called it TNT. Tiny noticeable things that are explosive. TNT, tiny noticeable things. Little micro habits that people notice what you do and it's explosive for you and for them. And this idea of incremental change, all this, does it make the boat go faster? Compounding impact of things. But I've seen this with the consistency of I weight train for 60 to 70 minutes, 4 times a week, and I run 6 times a week. Not very far, 3-5 kilometers with the dogs in the morning, and then I'll weight train on 4 of those days. I've been doing that now for a number of years, and it's been really great. And that discipline and that resilience that comes from that is phenomenal. And it begins my day. So I actually allocate until about 10:30, 11 of the day is all about that bookending the start of my day. Everyone knows about bookending. The beginning, the end of the day, you can control it more. But why I say this is with my personal trainer, I had this belief that I'll just sort of train at this level of weights, and that's probably it because I'm an older guy. And he went, well, what if you could do another 10 kilograms on this? I said, no, I can, well, I suppose I could. Well, how out of 10, how hard was that? I said, well, I suppose it was a 7. He said, well, okay, let's put 10 on. Really? Yeah. And then we did that set. And then I went and got a drink and came back and did it again. He'd slipped on 10 again. And I pushed that out and I went, that was pretty hard. Seemed like heavier. He goes, it was. I put 10 kilograms on. I didn't know that. So I then achieved something I didn't know. It's almost like this belief. So I was born with this congenital heart defect. I won't explain it, but basically my heart works at 50%. I never knew that. So I joined the British Army. Had they known, they would never let me in. I spent 20 years in the British Army. I set this world record for the double mountain marathon. I did triathlons. I did airborne training. I got my parachute wings and my maroon beret. I was very proud of all that. Had I known I had a heart defect, I would never have joined the army. I would never attempt these. I go, no, I have a heart defect. So actually, sometimes a belief is a blissful ignorance. If you are told something, you can't do it because of you believe them.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. And I think also, the other sort of theme that you're talking about, which is something that I coach my clients on, is the doing something in a regular, committed, habitual way, which does a number of things. Like it builds the resilience, it builds the habit and the structure and the kind of what I think of as and talk about as like self-trust. This I'm committing to and I'm following through. So you are, you're acting in coherence with your values and your, the things that your goals, right? You're doing them, right? Which creates self-trust, right? one of the things that I'll say to my clients is when you cultivate habits in a regular way, whether it's, always sending an email after a sales call, whether it's, filing your taxes at this date rather than the night before they're due, et cetera, you are doing these intentional behaviors so that in a, the shit hits the fan moment, you have the skill set there to activate the habit that you need to be the right kind of leader, the right kind of, person, somebody who's working in alignment with your values and so on, right? So sort of with that idea of like, I talk about it as like doing the things in an intentional way so that when you need it and in a reactive moment, you have the neural pathways, the motor training, the proprioceptive awareness, the fill in the blank, the mindset to activate it under stress. What, in your experience, does a resilient leader do differently on a, ordinary Tuesday morning that pays off when the proverbial hits the fan?
Yeah, and I'll use a prop for those who can see of the book again with Inspired Leadership Compass. And you've used the words self-trust, intentional coherence, and add integrity, an integration. So when you're doing all the habits or all the elements that make an inspiring leader, you are acting with integrity. You're integrated. But when you miss a bit out, like your health, you might have a habit for junk food and a sweet tooth, and sugar is your addiction, which it is. Fast foods, as we know, is now proving to be as dangerous as smoking was 20, 30 years ago. But yet there's still a whole industry built around it. But if you've got that bit wrong, you are disintegrated. You are not in integrity, you're disintegrated, and things fall apart. So you actually, it is like keeping an eye on all aspects to make the whole thing with integrity integrated, your whole life, your work. So you can't be one person at work and another person at home. And I know I've met many CEOs I've coached who've gone, yeah, but at home I'm like this, but at work I'm like that. And I go, that's utterly disintegrated. So like, who are these two people? Can we bring them together? And why can't you be the same person in both? Why do you have to be a different this is back to the masks. Oh, I have to wear this mask at work. And the Japanese talk about the three masks, the outer mask for everybody, the mask for the family, and then you take it all off and there's the final mask. You look in the mirror and you like the man or woman in the mirror, or you don't. And there've been times when I haven't, but now looking in the mirror without being smug about it, I see myself with all my mistakes, my blemishes, the things I've done wrong in my life, and I can live with that every day. But I think this idea of intentionality, your words, coherence, integrity, that leads to self-trust, because you're going to be living these hot habits, you're going to be living in these certain ways, and because that's what I do, this is not what I do. I don't do junk food. I do clean food. I don't do, lazing around. I get up at 7 a.m. every day. Whatever happens, I'm consistently getting up at 7. And consistency, as you know, with sleep is a very good habit. So I think that's what works for the most successful people. And by success, of course, you go, what is success? It isn't climbing the ladder and finding it's leaning against the wrong wall. It's whatever you set your priorities in mind. It's my relationship and the love I have for my wife, being here now, health, family, CEO's Compass, the book, the podcast experiences, and then charity, giving back to our foundation charity, helping the victims of violence against women and girls.
I think, one of the things that really sticks with me sort of listening to you is, the way that, going into the army and then going into sort of corporate, which a lot of the places that you've played are very kind of rule bound and structured and ritualistic in the, you do this, you follow this, you continue along. And that what you have done is you've taken the good bits of that, right? I'm going to commit to my regular daily exercising. I'm going to commit to my sleep. I'm going to commit to eating healthily. I'm going to commit to the things that I know serve my true north, right? Allow me to live in alignment and create self-trust. Yet you don't hold on to them in a way that is rigid and, creates an inaccessibility around things like vulnerability and connection and intimacy, which, we sort of touched on at the beginning with the don't cry, like, what are you sniffling for, right? Like, which, having had a father who went to Eton and all of that, like, I am familiar with that world, right? So I think that's the thing that really stays with me, is that you took those sort of, really useful pieces out and then made them your own, which I think for me is really what true leadership is about, is similar. I'm a Buddhist, and one of the things that I've always loved about Buddhism is when you die, like, just, you don't believe everything I say, go out and check it out for yourself. Like, read all the things, listen to all the stories, read all the books, but don't believe it, right?
Well,
Go out.
I love the fact.
Yourself,
I
right?
love the fact that you're a Buddhist, because I am by inclination Buddhist. So I every day when I go after I've trained in the gym, one of my other routines, 20 minutes in the hot tub. I'm lucky enough to be able to afford a hot tub in the garden. Beautiful hot tub, sit in there, and I have Buddhist teachings that I listen to. And it's all sorts, about 80 different ones on YouTube. There's some wonderful ones. And also, if I can't sleep, generally I've got without tech, but there was a phase I went through when I couldn't sleep before I got the CPAP machine for the obstructive sleep apnea, where I would listen to Buddhist teachings until I went to sleep. I then went and did the 11-day Buddhist Vipassana retreat, which was life-changing and pretty tough, particularly because the day before I went, the cardiologist had said, you have 10 years to live. And, now I'm going off on a 10-day silent retreat, and I'm going to be on my own, coming to terms.
Sitting there thinking about that. Yeah.
And I can't talk to anybody.
Yeah.
So I really find the fundamental principles, and I'm talking to the knowledgeable one, but just as a layman, the impermanence and the fact that things are always changing, the non-attachment, and the beginner's mind are three particular things that serve me incredibly well. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, no, I mean, beginner's mind, I think, is huge, because one of the things that I love about the beginner's mind concept is that in the mind of an expert, there's only one way to do it. In a beginner's mind, there's multiple ways, which you sort of articulated with your conversation with your daughter about doing her maths homework, right? So that's one of the things that I love about the concept of the Buddha, of the beginner's mind. I mean, there are many things that I absolutely love about Buddhism, but I think, the one thing that I also find fascinating, which I'm sure is familiar to you with, your past, is that when we face death, we can live wholly, right? When we're not scared of death, we can be in the moment. When we, combination of, being in the military and your health diagnoses, like this idea, and I sort of navigated it as a parent of, a child who battled cancer, right? Like, when you're sitting there thinking, these lives are precious and they may not go in the way that we thought or hoped or believed or, expected, right? Right? Let me get comfortable with the concept of death. And it is interesting to me as a society. I mean, we could go off on a whole tangent, and that we are not great at handling death. But when we do get comfortable with death, like, I've made a death playlist for my kids. I'm like, when I die, these are the songs I want played at my funeral. Like, Another One Bites the Dust. I'm like, that's funny. Like, let's laugh at my funeral. Like, not because it's funny that I'm dead, but like a little levity.
There's so many connections between you and I, which I find fascinating. I love this concept of a good life and a good death. And I am ready for death now. When it comes, it comes. And so every day is a bonus, because my brother died of metastatic cancer. He was told, it was my other brother, the surgeon, who recognized this and said, I know we're in COVID, but this isn't COVID you've got. This is much more serious. Go and have a scan. Had a scan. It'd gone everywhere. He had to have radiation in his brain, had to have a vertebrae removed, pins at his leg. They tried it all, but it was too late. And within 10 weeks, he was dead. So he had all sorts of plans. And he wasn't really prepared for that. And I still remember the final conversation we had sitting outside where he just had his operation. We're sitting outside his bungalow. He lived quite a simple life. But that will stay with me. And the fact is that I think the combination of Stoicism, which I do try and practice a lot, that's a lot of my beliefs, but the Stoicism and Buddhism are so aligned. It's almost like, how did we have the Greeks and the Romans over here, and at the same time over there was Buddha doing his experience, and they are so aligned. And the wisdom of both, I can be listening to a playlist about Stoicism and one about Buddhism. I'm going, which is which? And so this whole idea of preparing to live your life as if you might die tomorrow, that is, I find, makes my life so much simpler. It's not macabre at all. And I think I ought to play Another One Bites the Dust when I go. Because, it's back to that one, man plans and God laughs.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I've had such a fun conversation with you, Jonathan, but I think we need to wrap it up so our listeners can get on with their day. So I'm going to end with, if our listeners could take away just one thing from our conversation, and that could be an insight or a shift or an action, what would that be?
That only the strong can be vulnerable, and have a discipline and have a consistent routine.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for joining us today on Hot Habits with Dr. Tamsin, Conscious Leadership in Action.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here, and thank you for taking the time to listen. Until next time, remember that the way you lead your inner world shapes how you lead on the outside. I'm Dr. Tamsin Astor. Thanks for listening to Hot Habits.